Hi guys, Conor McManus here. Delighted you could join me just for a quick brief chat with both Dr. Ilona Duffy and Barry Ahi here in relation to mental health in young adults and teenagers, and a wee bit of a discussion around La519 and what the organisation is all about. So Barry, if you would mind just giving us a brief rundown as to what La519 does.
Yeah. And again, thanks for joining us. La519 is it was set up on the 30th of March this year by my wife Deirdre and I, in response to what we see as a need in the greater community on mental health and suicide prevention in particular. Our son Luke died on the 25th of May 2019. He died by suicide, and that obviously was the catalyst to all of this. It was a big shock, of course, to the family. But 2 years on, to mark his 18th birthday, we decided to do something. And having searched and thought about it for a long time, we thought taking an active role in giving back to the community and helping it in some way with our experiences, that might in turn save a life or do something to bring people to a better place. So we set up La519. It's a non-profit organisation, so it's limited by guarantee. So a non-profit organisation is something that's limited by guarantee. In other words, it has no shareholders. It's got only members. So there's no profit retained within the entity, and there's no ability to give out dividends as such. So all the funds that are raised through the organisation go towards our key objectives. And our key objectives are to create awareness of mental health issues and supports that are there to help people that are suffering or going through a low time or moment in their life. La519 itself, LA, how we came up with the name initially was our son Luke. His initials, Luke Ahi, and the 5 being the month of May and the 19 being the year 2019. But as I've gone through this process, and we're only a couple of months into it, I've come to realise that actually La519, it means much more than that now. It's in fact means a lot more than that now. And the LA, I would say, means more local area or local action, and the 5 happens to be the month of May, which again research has taught me that the month of May in particular is a high point in the annual calendar for suicides. And 19, the age group we target in particular is from 12 years up to 25 years or even older. And it's quite prevalent amongst teenagers and adolescents and young adults between 15 and 24, but the average age is 19. So by some strange coincidence, the 519 represents the month it's most likely to happen and the age is most likely to happen at. All, I guess, coincidence in some strange way. But so La519, that's what we're about, and we're trying now to reach out and connect with the greater community, particularly the young adults and teenagers who are struggling, particularly now after this pandemic, and let them know that there is help and support. One of the things I noticed from our experience is that there is a void. There is a lack of knowledge of all the supports out there. 2 years ago, when this happened, we didn't know of a fraction of the supports that were out there. And I feel, had we known a bit more about it or about the supports, we might have reached out better, and maybe Luke will be with us today.
So Barry, what you're essentially saying there is La519 is a non-profit organisation aimed at, I suppose, highlighting the help and the support structures that are out there for indeed families or young kids that are struggling with their own mental health.
Yeah, completely. That's it. We're non-profit. We've applied to become a charity. We hope to be sometime in the near future. But in any event, yes, we want to create awareness, and we want to bridge that gap and just make sure people become a lot more
essentially
aware.
make it easier for families to reach out and have somewhere to go, or know where they go, or know
Absolutely.
where to go.
Well, the first thing we did is create a platform. Again, social media. All young people nowadays are on social media. So it seemed to be the right choice and the first place to go. So we set up an Instagram account, and we set up a website and a Facebook account. So the website is www.la519.com. And there's an Instagram, of course, which is the same. And with that, we're able to get access to younger minds out there who are constantly on devices, such as phones, and really communicating nowadays through social media. So social media is a big part of this. We have a text facility. We've partnered up with the crisis line, the National Crisis Line. And if anyone out there at the moment is having a low or feeling down or just feel they need some help, if they were to text LA519 to 50808, and that will start a conversation. And that conversation is monitored by artificial intelligence, and it'll begin with a trained volunteer. And if at some point into the conversation it's realised that they need greater help or support, there will be a very experienced counsellor then that will be referred and take up the conversation and carry it through, and hopefully get that individual the help and support they need quickly. And it's all anonymous, it's all free, it's accessible 24/7, so 24 hours a day, 7 days of the week, and it's just all by texting, which is suitable to young people nowadays, because that's how they communicate generally. You know, so that's one of the first things we did, and so in doing that, again, it's trying to reach out to connect with the young people who don't know where to go, who don't know who to talk to, who are struggling with many different issues. It could be anything from school to relationships to whatever it is young people go through. And sometimes they're private and they're in their own room and they don't know where to go. Maybe this is a way we can reach them.
Well, look, if it helps only one person, it will have been well worth it.
Yeah.
Barry, you probably mentioned, the issue of highlighting this, and Ilona, you're the professional here and probably deal with this on a daily basis. It's regularly in the media and it's talked about in suicide prevention and how we do it, but there probably still seems to be a stigma attached to it nonetheless, is there?
I think so. I agree with everything Barry has said, and that this is something that needs to be highlighted. And, sometimes there's a fear about talking about suicide and fear about talking about mental illness, because sometimes people think, well, if we talk about it, we're going to encourage people to do it, or we're giving them ideas. But yet we're happy to talk about road traffic accidents. We're happy to talk about drink driving and speeding. And by talking about those and highlighting them, it doesn't mean we're giving the people the idea that they should speed on the road or drink and drive. So I think we need to see it in that way, that talking about it doesn't put the idea into somebody's mind, but talking about it opens up a chance for them to be able to discuss it, and also for them to realise that it is okay to feel low and that there is help out there. So I think it's so important that we are opening this up. For many, many years, mental health has had a stigma. People have kind of seen it as a curse, as something not to talk about, something to hide and something to be ashamed of. whereas it's as much a real illness as having diabetes, as having epilepsy, as having chronic bronchitis or asthma, and we've got to see it that way and treat it that way.
Yeah, so it can be treated. That's the big thing here, and I suppose like there's a phrase that would be out there quite often is it's okay not to be okay, but what does somebody do with that? You know, what if somebody isn't feeling well, what do they do with not feeling okay? And I suppose the message here is trying to get out there is that there is help and there is support, and La519 is geared towards that.
We know that young people tend to hold in their feelings, and often it's because they don't know who to talk to about them, but more importantly, they don't know how to talk to. So they're kind of feeling low, they're feeling down, they're kind of lost in that darkness and sometimes don't know where to go and how to talk about it, and maybe are afraid to bring it up with their friends, or bring it up with their friends and maybe the friends kind of saying, well, jolly you along and no, you'll be fine, and sure, everything's going fine. And sometimes even they may talk to their family who say, listen, everything's okay, you know, think positive, you know. So we have to allow people to talk about their feelings. We have to guide them to, if we feel it's hard for them to talk to us. And sometimes it can be hard to talk about these things at home. And parents sometimes will say, well, they won't talk to me about it. We know they're low. School have maybe told us that they're feeling down. When we try talking, they won't. And it can be hard to talk to those who are close to you. So that's where sometimes being able to talk to someone a little distance away and connecting in with some of the supports that Barry's talked about there can help. And also talking to somebody professionally also can help. And you know, even before that, it can be talking to maybe an aunt or an uncle. It can be talking to an older friend or an older sibling. That can be the start of things, just to open it up. And I think the most important thing is that if somebody starts to talk about their mood, if somebody starts to say they're feeling low, don't let them end that conversation all of a sudden. You know, encourage them to talk about it. Say, well, talk to me a bit more about it. How long is it going? How long are you feeling this way? Are there specific things that are happening that are making you feel down? Encourage them to open up and talk a bit more. And, you know, bring it up gently again without kind of making them feel they're under the microscope, because that can be one of the things that naturally at home, if you're worried about one of your children being, you know, unwell and feeling down, you're watching what they're doing, you're watching where they're going, and that makes them feel worse about it. So, you know, it's getting that happy balance where you're there to offer the support, there to kind of keep an eye on things, but also allow them talk in their own time. Yeah,
and it's probably as much an awareness that maybe somebody is trying to confide in you or trying to reach out as well.
But there's something else there that's important. Like I know in our case with Luke, it's very important to keep the connect and to keep the communication, and certainly my wife Dee would have been very proactive in that regard, constantly trying to keep that connection. But there's something you need to be aware of, and that is, in our case, Luke seemed to get happier. It seemed like he got over the hurdle. It seemed like, oh, he's getting better. And for that brief period, which is maybe a month, 4 weeks, we let our guard down. And so if there's anything I can put out there and say, you know, unfortunately, you got to stick with it. And when you do see that, oh, there's a big lift in the mood and things are good here and wow, it's great, he's better. Really, you just can't completely let your guard down then. If anything, maybe be a wee bit more aware then, or a wee bit more diligent. Some people mightn't want to hear that, but I guess it's one thing I've learned, and it's just to say that. So it's just that...
They have a term to describe that, and it's called the cocoon of calmness. And sometimes it is that when perhaps somebody has made a decision, you know, to end their life, that they feel calm about it. But again, I think it's, as Barry said, it's you know, watching, it's keeping the lines of communication open as much as possible and talking where you can. But that's not always easy, because sometimes people don't want to talk.
Yeah.
And you can't force someone to talk who's feeling low. And remember that when you're feeling low, I think it's very hard. People feel very isolated when they are depressed, because they kind of feel, well, nobody else understands how I feel, and they don't want to talk, and everything's slowed down and everything can be sluggish, and it can be such an effort to do normal daily chores, to go to school, to concentrate, to get the homework done. And I suppose they're all part of the kind of the warning signs for us as well. But just to be aware that, you know, people may not open up to you, but I can keep trying. And again, we know that with young people, talking often isn't the way, and telephone calls aren't the way that they communicate anymore. And it is the texting, and the helpline text is fantastic, because we know that people are more likely to just pop a text. it feels that they're not being watched. They're able to do it and enter into a kind of some kind of a discussion via
sort
text.
of a see what happens. Throw a cast a line and see what happens on their end.
Yeah, well, yeah. You see, and again, it is difficult trying to keep the communication open for a parent with a teenage kid, and actually, friends they tend sometimes to communicate more with them, and so again, if you have a friend out there who you're worried about or who's feeling low, don't be afraid to let somebody know. Let somebody who can. Don't hold that burden yourself. Tell another friend or tell an adult or tell a guardian or tell a GP or do something. Friends can sense these things, and sometimes it will be well worth doing. But yeah, the whole thing with the communication, it is difficult, and you just can't give up. You gotta stick with it, and actually, my wife's a lot better than me, and hence she was the one keeping in touch with Luke more than I was. I guess it's not a good thing for men, they're not, and I guess maybe that's why suicide is so prevalent amongst young men. There was a scary statistic I read recently, but the biggest cause of death in the UK and Ireland for males under the age of 50 is suicide. So that's you're more likely to die from that than anything. If you're male and you're under 50 and you're living on the islands of Ireland and the United Kingdom. Scary statistic. So again, it's helping the male factor be a wee bit more in tune with their emotions and speak about it. A wee
bit more forthcoming when it comes to something like that there.
Talk.
As you say, Barry, young lads and young teenagers are you'd probably know that as well as anybody, Lona, that they're harder to get through to and communicate with, I suppose, and just getting their feelings off their chest, and it's not seen as the male, alpha male thing to do is talk and share
and
these
it's about
problems.
how do we start that? And I think we start that very early on, and that's where we've got to start with the interventions. Probably it's through schools, through our clubs, talking about all kinds of illnesses, because we talk about lots of things in clubs like sudden cardiac death and fitness and wellness, but it tends to all be around physical health. So I think it's kind of being able to, in the club setting, in a general setting, kind of talk about low mood, talk about anxiety, and be kind of able to acknowledge that these are things that happen to people and that it is okay. And again, just back to that whole thing, come and talk about it because you can be helped.
Trying to normalise it as much as we possibly can.
Yeah. So one of the things we're doing in La519, again, it's under our objectives, and that is training and resilience training and QPR training. Now, QPR sounds like a soccer club, but actually, again, this is just to my research and getting to know stuff, but Q is question, P is persuade, and R is refer or referral. And there is Train the Trainer program out there. And I've been in contact with a number of local schools about rolling out this QPR training amongst teachers, but also resilience and resilience training. Again, I've been in contact with the director of the educational centre. In fact, he's one of our members, as in one of our founders. So a key person, David McCaig. Again, about how we can maybe introduce a pilot program for resilience into schools, in particular primary schools, and then follow it up in secondary schools, so that there is that element of resilience and resilience training or teaching. So thanks to David, we've been in touch with SIPSI, a local organisation which is connecting all those support groups with the HSE and schools, and we have a follow-up meeting now on the 14th of July, but we're looking to see what we can do there to kind of roll out some kind of pilot program amongst all the primary schools. That we do not want this to be a one-hit wonder. We do not want this to be just a sticky plaster. The idea here is that it eventually becomes something that's part of the curriculum, in primary school and secondary school, and that we get it into the Monaghan Cavan area and then beyond. Monaghan Cavan's a hot spot. It's a black spot, unfortunately. The rate of suicide in Monaghan Cavan's the highest, amongst the highest in the country. I know in North Monaghan, in a population of 20,000 people, there's 8 suicides that I know of in the space of 5 months since the start of this year. That's a lot. I know from reading the Irish Times article a month or 2 after Luke died about suicide and about what it's like in Ireland, it gives the national average as 1 per 10,000. Well, in that case, we're not, we're 7 or 8 times the national average at those figures currently. So that's a scary fact and a big figure. So we're at Monaghan here is an area that really needs a lot of help and a lot of attention. Monaghan Cavan, the Monaghan Cavan area. So this is something we're working on. So the QPR training and the resilience training, and it's actually not just schools. We're aiming at clubs. So that's whether it's basketball, Gaelic, rugby, soccer, whatever. We've made contact with a couple of clubs already, but also parents, something we want to offer to parents and communities in general. So and again, something we want to facilitate. So there won't be a cost. La519 will pay for this. So there won't be a cost, but it's to get out there and to help people help themselves. And that's what that's about. Yeah.
Ilona, you maybe touched on something there in relation to, teenagers and that in terms of differentiating for parents and how do they see signs between, a typical low teenage mood and depression and I suppose what is the difference and what is depression within a young child or a teenager, or how can that be spotted, or what is the danger signs for a parent or guardian on that front?
Well, we know that as kids move into the teenage years, because of all kinds of changes, both chemical, hormonal, physical, mood is up and down. And I think all of us who have teenage children in our home know that. But you're right, what's the difference, I suppose, and how do you know that this is more than just maybe a kind of somebody feeling down for a bit because of losing a football match or being a bit stressed or a bit worried, and when it's something more of concern? So I think the big thing is that it's ongoing. It's not just one day of maybe kind of not wanting to go out and do things, but finding that there's a change maybe where your child's just not engaging and not involved. So not doing the usual things of meeting friends, stopping maybe at the weekend, gathering and meeting them or having them over. Maybe just kind of opting out of sports if there's someone who's been involved in football and basketball and suddenly finding that actually they're dropping out of that, they don't have the interest, they're not worried about the games and they're just not going to the training. And again, looking for changes in other things like schoolwork. And I think that's something that our teachers are more aware of now in the schools, that if they find a child who suddenly dropped off, is not kind of performing as well as they had, not able to concentrate in class, perhaps not having their homework done, not just presuming this is just them being lazy, but kind of exploring it a wee bit and kind of seeing what's up. Because part of when people become depressed, we know that there's a whole chemical imbalance. And really it is as real a physical illness as having diabetes. And diabetes, everybody knows what diabetes is. You've too much sugar or glucose in your system and you're probably not producing enough insulin. So one hormone is low and the other is high. Similarly, when somebody's depressed or in anxiety, what we tend to find is serotonin is kind of the happy hormone in our brain, drops and it's low. So that makes people feel just tired, sluggish, everything's an effort. They're just, feeling just that heaviness and that darkness and that sadness about themselves. But also we know that noradrenaline, the anxiety hormone, also rises. So that means their concentration is kind of affected. So that affects their schoolwork, it affects their ability to complete out homework and other tasks. And that can make them feel quite anxious. So they may be feeling a bit panicky at times, maybe perhaps about going to football, going into school. And finally, their sleep can then become affected. So initially it may be that they're having difficulty falling asleep and then they're waking 4 or 5 in the morning, worrying about things. So again, that's something else. If you notice your child's having difficulty going to sleep or is waking early in the morning, you kind of find them up at 5 or 6. So you're noticing just those changes. And if they're really struggling in the morning, because one of the things that we often know is that mornings can be very difficult. They're the hardest part of the day sometimes for people, for all of us perhaps getting up, but more so in someone who is depressed, that it's called diurnal mood variation. And it really has been shown that the mornings can be the hardest part of the day to face into and to get yourself kind of motivated and getting up. So I suppose recapping, it would be really kind of, if you notice that symptoms were ongoing, that every day somebody just seemed to be quieter, more withdrawn, dropping activities such as their sports, as meeting their friends, and a drop off in schoolwork, and just noticing that change and that it's persistent. That's then time to be kind of talking to them, and perhaps at that stage seeking some further advice. And people often say, well, who do I go to? What do I do? I suppose, it may be that there are the different websites that offer some advice and offer some information on it, but really probably your first port of call is always going to be your GP. If you have real concerns that, the mood is low, that things are being affected, I think it's worth talking to your GP. Now, that can be a challenge in itself, in that trying to persuade your son, your daughter, your child to go and see a doctor can be difficult. But often they actually are happy to talk about it because they know they're not feeling right. So I think they will often say yes. I'm often surprised myself when people ring. Parents often are the first person to ring and say, I'm really worried about them. And you kind of say, well, will they come in? Well, I don't know if they will. But they usually say yes.
So I suppose it's just being vigilant to that, and a wee bit of awareness around the mood of your child or your teenager, and when it becomes slightly more extreme than just a teenage low.
Yeah, there's a couple of things there that I just want to pick up on with Ilona. One of the things we'd like to do, one of the objectives of La519 is to have a patient-centric approach. So in cases where maybe the 15 or 16-year-old boy does not wish to go to see anyone, that we can get it, that a counsellor or someone can come see them at their home or at a neutral place. Generally they'll go to see a GP, but there might be other places they won't go to. Certainly in the case of our Luke, we experienced that, and he wasn't willing to go to CAMS for some reason, and we struggled trying to get him there, and he had 5 missed appointments, or 5 appointments that were never fulfilled. So one of our objectives is to help that, facilitate that, and that's about communicating with the current stakeholders, which are really those entities out there that are support groups, whether it's Pieta House or Jigsaw or Spun Out or So Sad, and there are many, many more, Aware, Alps. There's so many. I mean, I only knew of one when Luke wasn't well. Now I realise there's 30 plus. But in any event, that there is a kind of in the community, whichever the relevant support group is, that there's a joined up thinking between the GPs in that area, together with the HSE, together with the support groups, that that they can pool the resources together, and at least where it's needed, somebody can see a counsellor if they're at a really bad moment where they're not prepared to leave the home. And so that's one of the things that's our objective, is something we want to facilitate. So we're not looking to become another Pieta House or become another Jigsaw. We're looking to actually fill that void or bridge that gap and get a better communication and a better flow and pooling of resources with all these support groups. That's really what we're trying to do here. That's really something we want to do, and it's a big objective for us. So, yeah. The other thing, again, going back to a point of Lona's there, and that is about the mood and the chemicals. And one of the things we're looking to do, and something we're going to roll out in September. So on the 10th of September is World Suicide Prevention Day, and we're going to roll out a big breakfast. So Ilona mentioned about the morning time and the breakfast time, and how they can be heavy thoughts or reactive or in a bad way. But we want to roll out a big breakfast campaign for that weekend, which is the 10th, 11th and 12th of September. And with that we want to promote good foods that help release serotonin, foods that have got the chemicals in there that will actually help lift the mood. Foods like eggs, berries, such as blueberries, oats, and there's many more. And so we're communicating with a few of the producers at the moment to see if they'll work with us, and then we'll make contact with the retailers, and we'll look to roll out some kind of campaign at the end of August leading into September. It'll do two things. It'll create awareness and help make people aware of the supports locally to them. And secondly, it'll get funding to help with all these objectives we have. And then finally, it'll actually maybe help educate the younger people to maybe eating something that will really help them, help with those moods. If that can become a regular diet for them, it is actually helping that chemical imbalance, and it's a way of targeting that chemical imbalance. So that, starting the day off with a good breakfast, with the right foods, and treating that chemical imbalance is something we're looking to do. And September the 10th is when we plan to roll it out and make it a big campaign.
I suppose as much as anything else, Ilona, is just getting into that healthy lifestyle and diet and that structure, and if this can help in any which way, it's certainly worth getting behind.
It is, and I think, again, it is about prevention, and we're talking about Suicide Prevention Day, and that's so important because for those of us who are parents, how do we try and just improve things and perhaps just help with things? And I think you're right, diet plays a role. We know that sleep is vital, and we absolutely know data shows that those who aren't getting a good night's sleep have a higher risk of depression and anxiety, of all mental health problems. So I think life has changed. When we were younger, we went to bed and that was it. There were no phones in the room, there were no TVs in the room. And I think things have changed so much that where children have their phones, they have their iPads, they have their iPods in the room, and they're getting blip, blip, blip messages all night. And I know it's one of the things I would see when people come in with fatigue, kids tired, not sleeping. And the first question I ask is, well, do you have your phone in bed at night? And it's kind of frightening how many children do. And I would say one thing all parents should be doing is making sure that younger kids especially do not have phones in their room. We need to ensure that our children are getting a good night's sleep. And really younger kids up to the age of 12 should be getting anywhere from 10 to 12 hours sleep. Adults need 8 hours sleep. So we're talking about trying to ensure that you're getting good quality sleep. Watching things like your caffeine intake and your kids' caffeine intake more and more. Maybe you're having fizzy drinks. Lots of kids are drinking things like Red Bull, Monster drinks. They're all creating anxiety type symptoms because they're getting your adrenaline going, and they will affect your sleep. So if we can ensure that our children are getting a good night's sleep, we know that's going to help with their future mental health and well-being. Barry's talked about diet, exercise, obviously trying to encourage them to be involved in exercise. And not every child is going to be involved in a team sport. They're not all going to want to play football or basketball, but we can bring them out and do family walks. We can just be encouraging that time away from the screens. And again, even recently there's a lot of concern about addiction to screen time and children and young adults and teenagers, playing video games, playing things. And while they're good and they have their role and they have their place and many people feel relaxed with them, they also generate anxiety and they change our brainwave patterns. So on an ongoing and persistent basis, they're not good too. So simple measures in the home to try and just maintain your child's well-being are sleep, diet, some exercise and limiting screen time.
Yeah, well, it's even something I know I had to do myself was just make sure that the phone goes away, at night, just put it away. Just
for all of us. There's another thing with the phones and the tablets. People don't realise it, but they all emit a blue light, and they all try to, if you look at iPhones and everything, they all talk about the blue filter, it's going to reduce the blue light. It doesn't. So blue colour drops our melatonin, which is the hormone that actually helps us sleep. So if you have a device in your room, it's going to be emitting this, and that is absolutely been shown to drop your melatonin, which means that you may get to sleep, but you're not in the deep, relaxing sleep, and that's what we need to do. So again, it's another reason for not having devices in the room.
And as well as that, staying off, just getting away from that space, in terms of social media, we're all on it. I'm on it myself, and I use it regularly, but it's like a different world, it's nearly removed from reality, a lot of what you see online and on social media and on Instagram and Twitter and all these sorts of things. So it's no harm just to get away from that.
And perhaps talk to your kids about it, because I think what we don't realise is that what they're seeing is so heavily curated. So they're looking at posts on Snapchat, they're looking at posts on Facebook, on Instagram, and it's all a perfect life. So they're seeing people around them who look perfect, who seem to be happy all the time, have wonderful things happening. And nobody's posting about the bad stuff. Nobody's posting the day that they feel awful. Nobody's posting about the day that they've no makeup and they've broken out in a team of acne. But yet all our kids are looking at this and thinking, this is what my life should be like. So even having that conversation that it's not real, it's curated, it's chosen to make everything look good, and realising that life's not that like that. But I think many of us actually don't even realise that because we're not on these social medias. So again, perhaps that's something that many of the schools do talk about and at a very early stage, perhaps before kids have access to all of these kind of Instagram pages and Facebook, etc.
No, absolutely. Yeah. And because, the problem with social media is everything looks rosy. Far away fields are green. They're there and they're looking, gosh, their friend's better looking than them, or their friend's doing more things or going further places or achieving better in their sport. And it goes on and on and on. And really, not everybody's life is perfect. Not everybody's life is rosy. So the perception is not the reality. But unfortunately,
that's all
for them, the perception is the reality.
And even as you say, Barry, if a kid or that is in the room on their own for the last hour or two going to bed, and this is all they're flicking through all the time, it's just probably going to be seeping into their background, in the back of their head all the time. So
And they'll hit a low point, they'll find something, and internally they'll feel bad, and sometimes they'll internalize it. And again, men seem to do that more. Unfortunately, these things, there is help out there, and we can overcome these things, and that's why prevention is so important, and that's why resilience is so important, and that's why we got to get in there and help our kids through this and learn resilience at a younger age and have it that is sustainable for them going through these difficult patches. And make them realise that, it's only a temporary problem. And
I think one other thing that's important is often parents and people around someone who is feeling down and who've been through even the loss of someone as a result of kind of depression, etc., can feel, I should have done more. And I think, you do what you can do. You help. And again, a lot of what we're talking about here is trying to prevent things happening. But that doesn't mean you can always prevent somebody becoming depressed. So somebody can have a perfect life and everything is okay and they're not being bullied at school, they're not having any difficulties. And that goes back to, what causes depression. And people often kind of say, well, why do I feel this way? Everything's good. And then they feel even worse for feeling low because they feel I've no reason to feel bad. And it's important. We talked about the chemical aspect of it, the two hormones that can change in your brain. But we know that there are two types of depression. And I suppose one is primary or endogenous depression. And that's where, out of the blue, for no reason, somebody can start to feel low and just really life's perfect and they can't understand it and they just start feeling low, start feeling tired, all of those kind of symptoms of the broken sleep. The second group, probably the one that we probably see more of, would be reactive or secondary depression, and that often is related to stresses, to pressures. And I suppose that's one where we'd like to feel that we can get in there and maybe prevent that, and that's where all of those techniques to kind of help, as you've talked about, the resilience, dealing with failure, because we all don't get a job, we all don't pass an exam, there are things that happen to us. So it's how do we cope with that and how do we learn to cope with that? And that's where that early intervention and resilience is so important. But I think it is important that, we're all doing the best for those who are around us. And we're not the cause of anything that's happened to them that's caused their mood disorder. And what we're talking about here is really how to kind of try and improve people's mental well-being and mental health and offering them the supports that you've discussed, Barry.
Yeah. No, absolutely, yeah. And that's really it. It's to try and get those supports, get them out there, reach them, let them know it's there, make them aware. And again, raise the awareness. That's what we're trying to do here.
Thanks for joining, guys. There's been a fair bit of content in all of this today. So if anybody has any questions, hello@la519.com and email any questions into us and somebody will respond to you as soon as possible. Today was all about spreading awareness and, I suppose, for want of a better word, launching the LA519 and bringing awareness to the website and to the brand. So please don't be afraid to like and share, get involved, log on to the website, follow the social media pages and spread awareness as best you can. Thank you.